we finished the values of a Muslim family. Okay, and now we're in chapter 2, which is the relationship of a husband and wife. So we come back to this circle that we looked at earlier, and so the different family circles are, in the middle you have the husband and wife, which is the foundation of the family in Islam, and then you have their parents, so grandparents from both sides, and then you have the children. That's what we would call a nuclear family, but Islam, it's more Islamic to include the grandparents and not just the husband and wife and the kids. And then the middle circle is where you have the maharim. These are the people that you cannot marry because they're already related to you. So either they're related by blood or by marriage or by breastfeeding. Those are the relatives that have rights, like rights of inheritance. A lot of the rights that the Quran and Sunnah speak about, like don't break your ties with your family, these are the people that are being spoken about mostly. And then the last circle are like cousins, children, your brother-in-law, your sister-in-law, and their children. They belong in the outside family. So when you talk about rights and responsibilities, these are the people in the middle who have the most rights upon you, and you have the most responsibilities towards them. As you go outside the circle, it becomes a little bit more lenient. There's more gray area over there about what that relationship has to look like. Like it's not like, oh, you have to give your cousin a gift every Eid, and if you don't give it, you're breaking ties. There's nothing like that, right? But for example, if you're not giving your right to your wife or to your husband or to your parents, that's a much heavier thing, right? That's something you have to really keep in mind, that you're not taking away somebody's right. So what are the marital expectations? Like once nikah happens between a man and a woman, what are the expectations that naturally follow? So one of those is from the Quran. Allah says, live with them in kindness, right? There's like a longer ayah, and towards the end Allah says, live with them in kindness. That is, so kind treatment from the husband to the wife and the wife to the husband, it becomes an expectation. Like it's from Allah. It's not something optional, but you actually have to treat them with kindness. Number 2, conjugal rights, which basically means, there's different definitions, but basically it refers to the intimate relationship between a husband and a wife. So this is a right not just of the husband, but of the wife as well. Why is this important to mention separately? Because there are cultures where people are still so ignorant about biology and about human nature that they assume that women don't even have the ability to feel pleasure. And the emphasis on marital rights is given mostly to the husband, like, oh, you have to, do this for your husband because he needs it, he wants it, whatever. But there's not a lot of focus given to the woman. But Islam is not like that, right? Islam put an emphasis on the woman's rights as well. So in a halal manner, in an acceptable manner, what does that mean? It means that the man cannot ask the woman to do anything that's haram, right? Behind closed doors. Like, he cannot demand something that is haram. And we know, I'm not going to go into details right now, but there are certain things that are not allowed, that a husband and wife are not allowed to do. He cannot force her to do those things. And if he does, she can actually go to an imam. She can go to somebody for help that, oh, he's asking me to do things that I'm not allowed to do. In an acceptable manner. So he has to treat her humanely. He has to be loving and kind towards her before he tries to approach her. For that, the Prophet ﷺ said very explicitly about how a man is supposed to treat his wife before he approaches her. Number 3, moving to his residence. So there's different scenarios people might find themselves in, right? Let's say that a couple gets just their nikah done, right? And they don't have what we call in Urdu the rukhsati, like the woman does not move out of her parents' house. Who has the rights in that case? It's the father, right? Because the father, she's living under the father's roof, so even if she has the nikah done, it's still the father who's financially responsible, so he has the right to stop her. Like the husband can't be like, well, I'm married to you now, like let's go out every day, or like going on halal dates or whatever. They have to reach some sort of middle ground that's acceptable, right? But if they consummate the marriage, so let's say the nikah happened, they consummated the marriage, now the husband has more right, okay? Or if she moves to the husband's house, so like the marriage is complete, they've moved, and she's gone to his house, now he's in charge of her, so she goes by his rules and not the father's rules. So the authority has been transferred over from the father to the husband at this point. So the basic rule is that authority is with the one under whose roof she's living in, because he's the one providing, so he's the one who has authority. Number 4, the mahar. So this is the gift that a woman asks for and the man must give. And if he doesn't give it, this is held against him on the Day of Judgment. He can basically get punished by Allah if he chooses not to give it on purpose. It can be anything. I know it's like really trendy these days for, girls to ask for kittens as dowry. Yeah, it's, yeah, there, apparently Gen Z has this thing where they ask for kittens as dowry. Yeah. Like, oh, you don't have to get me anything, just get me a kitten. I would not advise that because you're basically just letting him get off easy at that point. Like, so men, it's in men's nature to basically value what they give, what they invest in, right? So it's not like, some non-Muslim critics would be like, okay, well, does this mean that you're buying the woman because you're paying a price? No, you're not. It's not the same as, like, in some villages, people buy women. It's not like that. You're giving this price because Allah stipulated that it must be given, right? That this is fard upon the man. How much does it have to be? That's up to the woman, right? Now, we also have in some cultures where the father decides the dowry. Is this haram? No, it's not haram. He can do that. But it should be the woman's prerogative. Because sometimes what the men do is that they treat the mahar, the fathers, they treat the mahar as like a divorce insurance. Like, oh, if I charge, like if I tell him to pay like $30,000 or something, then he's basically investing a lot into my daughter, right? It's like less likely to get divorced or something like that. Don't know how exactly that works, but it should be according to the man's livelihood. That's the to the woman alone. He can't take it. He can't take it. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. He can't take it. So yeah, in some cultures, again, the family of the girl, they're like put pressure on her and take the money from her. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to take her money because every single penny of this belongs to her and her alone. Her mother-in-law can't take it. Her mother can't take it. Her father can't take it. Nobody. And it must be given at that time. But if the man asks her that, hey, you asked me, for example, for 30K. I can only afford 10K right now. Can I pay the rest of the 20K like over the next 5 years or the next 10 years? And she agrees to that, that's okay. That's called a deferred mahar, okay? So he's not delaying it because he wants to get out of paying it, right? He doesn't have any sinister intentions. He intends to give it, but he's like, hey, I can't give it right now. And she agrees to that happily, that's okay. Then there's no sin on him. There's no like none of that pressure or anything. But if he on purpose, like he lies to her or he says, yeah, I'll give it, and then he just doesn't give it because, like, even though he can afford to and he doesn't give it, the Day of Judgment, the Prophet ﷺ said he'll come like as a disfigured man, like he'll be leaning towards one side, like he's just not going to be meeting Allah in a good state, right? So we already know that that spells trouble for him. The point of the mahar is that it should have a monetary value. Like it should be something that somebody considers valuable. Like you could ask for like a ring or like, a piece of jewelry or something. It can be as little as you want. I know one of the sheikhs, he was telling a story where his wife only asked him for like $1, but it was like kind of, I guess it was sweet because they just were like, I don't know, they had this agreement between them, whatever. So like he was okay with that, she was okay with that. So it's just something that they did. You guys can grab more chairs from the back if there's not enough. But it should have monetary value because the man should feel like, okay, I'm giving something in return for marrying her. Like it should feel like he's giving something. So the cat is okay, but definitely try to add some money to that as well. Number 5, sustenance and spending. This is the same as number 3. So like once the wife moves into the husband's home, now he's responsible for providing for her, for taking care of her, for her emotional needs, her physical needs, everything that she needs. He's responsible for that. Number 6, establishment of affinity. So like the middle circle that we spoke about over here, that's being established through marriage. So the father-in-law is now your mahram, meaning you cannot marry him because you just married his son, right? And the interesting thing about the father-in-law is that even if you get divorced, he remains your mahram for life. So like you don't have to wear hijab in front of him, but you can't marry him, anything like that. He's your mahram for life now. And she's entitled to inheritance. So this is an interesting one. Let's say a nikah was done and they did not consummate the marriage. But just because a nikah was done, now you have a right to his inheritance as well because you still count as his wife. So these are all the things that the nikah basically establishes as soon as it's done. Number 7, verification of a child's lineage. So it is through a valid nikah that a child's legitimacy is established. So this is one of the maqasid al-sharia, right? Like why is one of the reasons why zina is haram is because it tarnishes the lineage, right? So nikah is the only legitimate way to legitimize a child's lineage. So this is what happens automatically through nikah. Number 8 was number 6. Oh yeah, so it's establishment of inheritance, where we spoke about that. Number 9, right of obedience to the husband. If she lives under the father's roof, he holds more authority, but if she moves in with the husband, his qiyama is established over her. So qiyama, this term comes from in the Quran, right, where Allah says, الرجال قوامون على النساء, right? And qawamun is very, very misunderstood. It's often translated as authority, but it actually means authority and responsibility, right? That's the full meaning of qiyama, because whoever has authority, they have to have responsibility, right? There's no such thing as power in Islam without accountability. And if you have the accountability piece, you also have to have some authority, right? Because, for example, let's say a man is, let's say a woman wants to take a job that's not physically safe for her. Now the husband can say no to that, right? Now the modern person would be like, or the feminist would be like, okay, well, why does she have to seek his permission? It's because he's responsible for her physical safety, right? At the end of the day, physical, emotional, all kinds of safety. So because he's responsible for her, that's why he has the power to stop her from doing certain things. Okay, so it's not for him to abuse, but it's for him to protect her. That's why it's there. Very similar to a father, right? Like, we wouldn't question our father's intentions if they were telling us to do something that was for our own benefit. Number 10, the right of the husband to chastise, discipline his wife. This again comes from an ayah in the Quran where Allah is talking about if you fear nushuz. And in this, when the word nushuz is used for a female, it means infidelity. If you fear infidelity on the part of your wife, then you have the right to discipline her. But again, that doesn't mean to beat her up. That's not what that means. It just means there's three different stages, where one of them, the husband leaves the bed of the wife to kind of make her feel that emotional distance, like, okay, I'm upset with you. One of them is to counsel her and to guide her and to give her advice. And then I believe the last one is the one where he takes like a siwak, like something like this, and just goes like that. That's the meaning of, like, hit her, that ayah. That's literally it, like, just like that. Like, it's just like you take a toothbrush and you go like this with a siwak, right? It doesn't hurt. It's symbolic. It's symbolic of the fact that, like, I'm really upset with you, or like, you need to change your ways. And again, that's in the case of a wife who has been like, who has not been faithful, or he fears that she is not being faithful. That's a very specific scenario, okay? All right, so what are the rights and obligations? So generally for both, Allah says that women have rights similar to those of men equitably, although men have a degree of responsibility over them. So alayhinna daraja means they have 1 degree over them. So that degree is of responsibility and authority, and Allah says Allah is Azizun Hakim, the Almighty, the All-Wise. So this is where Allah is establishing that just because the husband's rights come up so often, people start to think like, oh, does the wife even have any rights at all, right? Because if you look at the list, which we're going to go into looking at the list, it's going to look very small, right? So in comparison, you're going to be like, wait a second, why does the husband have so many more rights? It's not about quantity, but about what is the nature of those rights, right? And why are they there? So Allah says that women also have rights. This very clearly spells it out for those who like to deny that women have rights in Islam. Okay. All right, so the mutual rights. What are the mutual rights of the husband and wife? Having the right to enjoy one another. This is referring to intimacy. That it's not just the husband's right, but it's also the wife's right to be with her husband, to have that relationship with him. To the point where some of the khalifas, they wouldn't even allow a man to leave his wife for more than like 4 days, right? They had like different ideas of how long they thought that a wife could live without her husband, could stay without her. So what one of them did is that he actually asked his daughter, hey, what's the longest that one of you can go without her husband? And she said 4 months. That's the longest. Like, any longer than that, like, she actually like said that she didn't have any haya in saying that, because in Islam we don't have haya when it comes to learning and teaching, right? So he, as a father, did not even have haya to ask his daughter that, because it's nothing wrong. So he asked her as a point of reference, and then he basically established as a rule, I believe it was Umar radiallahu anhu, but I don't remember exactly. And he established as a rule that the men could not be sent into battle for longer than that. So any expedition the men were sent out to, he would say that before 4 months they have to come back, because the wife, it increases the chances for her to become unchaste. And the goal is to protect the chastity of the wife and the husband, right? So he wouldn't allow the men to be gone for that long. Number 2, treating each other with good manners. This goes for both husband and wife. They both have to treat each other with good manners. And number 3, establishes the right of inheritance for both of them. Okay, so what are the rights of the husband then? The rights are obedience or oversight. Oversight is a better word. The reason why I kept obedience there anyway is because any Islamic book that you're going to read, most of the lectures that you're going to listen to, they're going to use the word obedience. Even the Quran, some of the translations, they're going to use the word obedience. So I want to really clarify that obedience does not mean blanket authority, right, alone. It means more of an oversight. It's what a leader does, right? Like what the father does for the family, that's basically what the husband is doing for the wife as well. So his three roles are to protect, to preside, and to provide. So, so to protect. So he has to protect the wife's honor. He has to protect her physical safety, her emotional safety. He has to protect her from relatives of his that might be harming her, right? That's his job. He has to be like that shield for her. That's his job. For the kids as well, to preside, that's kind of like the decision-making part of it. Like, okay, where are we going to move? What job am I going to get? How are we going to manage the family affairs? What school are we going to send our kids to? So it's all happening together, but he has the final say. Again, because of that qawwam aspect, he has the final say, but he is encouraged to ask her. He's supposed to ask her. The Prophet ﷺ himself used to take shura from his wives, right? Even when he took him on travel, he would take advice from his wives. So the sunnah is to take advice from your wife, to treat her like an equal. But in case of disagreement on big decisions, his opinion takes precedence. That's what it means. Providing. So his job is to provide financially, and this is cultural. So in some cultures, like for example in the West, what is he expected to provide in the West? What is the cultural norm here that he takes care of, like the mortgage, for example, car insurance, health insurance, kids stuff. All of that is on him. But if they choose to do it together, there's no issue with that. But he is expected to provide whatever is culturally appropriate. Now, in some other country, health insurance might not even be a thing, right? It's just like he has to put food on the table, and that's it, right? Like that might be the extent of his provision. So this is where Islam allows for those cultural, kind of things variations, cultural variations. And this is why when you're in an intercultural marriage, or even like you're living here, but you marry somebody from back home, these things become very important to discuss, right? Because their expectations might be different from our expectations here. Like we might be expecting something, and someone coming from back home is like, well, I didn't know I have to give you like health insurance. Like I just take food on the table, right? So you have to like talk about these things. Like what exactly is our partnership going to look like? Like what are you going to be providing, right? And are we going to be a 2-income household, 1-income household? You have to discuss these things as well. Accepting his leadership. So there's general permission and there's specific permission. General permission refers to like, you talk to your husband like, okay, these are the places I visit. Like I go to the gym, I go to school, I visit these places with my friends. Like, are you okay with that? And he's like, yeah, I'm okay with you going to these places. You don't have to ask him every single time you go, right? Like, oh, is it okay if I go to the market? Like, is it okay if I go out with my friends to get coffee? You don't have to ask him every single time if you know that he's generally okay with you going to these places. Specific permission is like, you want to take a girls' trip to like Mexico. Like, you can't just go, right? Like, you have to like sit down, ask him, talk to him about it, look at the pros and cons, all that kind of stuff. And if he wants to stop you, he can, because of safety issues, right? Another specific permission would be like, a friend of his is at the house. Do you open the door for him or not, right? And you're home alone. And if he says no, you can't. You can't be like, oh, but that's being rude, and I don't want to, like he's at the door. You can't do that. Like if he says no, let the guy go back home. You tell him, sorry, my husband's not home right now. You can come back when he's home, and that's it, right? That's like, those are specific scenarios. Control. So how do you define control? Control is basically like you are dictating a commanded spaces that have room for independence. So for example, let's say a man tells you, well, you can only speak to your family like once a week, like on the phone. Like you could only speak to them once a week. There's no reason for him to do that. So like it's getting into the territory of control now. Like what's the reason for him to do that? Or he says like, you have these 2 best friends from like high school that you've been through a lot with, and he's like, I don't want you to talk to them anymore. Why? No reason. Like they haven't caused any fitna, they haven't tried to split you guys up, they haven't done anything wrong, but he's like, I just don't like them. I don't want you to talk to them. That's often how abuse starts, with isolation, right? I have taken DV training. That's how abuse starts, by isolating you from your family and friends and slowly cutting you off. And what religious men usually do is like, well, Allah told you to obey your husband, so you have to obey me. Or like, your family is going to cause issues, or your mom did this, or your sister did this, so I don't want you to talk to them anymore. That's a red flag. That's when you need to stop and be like, okay, why are you, like, ask yourself, like, what's happening here, right? That's a red flag. But if he's like, okay, I approve of you going to your mom's house, for example, every Friday because, you know, Friday's a good day, it's a weekend, whatever, that's okay. Like, you can have those days set where you visit your family and you go visit your friends or whatever. That's okay. Okay, not being friends with people he doesn't approve of. So if you have a female friend that he just doesn't like, again, that's very tricky, right? Versus like a female friend who could be causing fitna and you don't know, right? So that's where you want to get a second opinion. Ask your family, ask your other friends that you trust, like, hey, do you approve of this friend of mine because my husband is saying so and so, or like whatever, and do you agree with this, right? Because some girls are toxic and you just don't know because you've been friends with them for a long time. So it's good to just ask more people who know you, who you trust, about these types of scenarios. When it comes to a man, you're not allowed to be friends with a man that your husband doesn't approve of. And again, if it's like a close friendship, that's not allowed, period. Like for a married woman in Islam, like that's just not allowed. If it's like a colleague, they're just saying like hello and salam to, that's okay. And you're kind of like just meeting each other in front of everybody, and you're being friendly with them, that's okay. But you can't be friends with them. There's a difference between being friendly and being friends, because when you are somebody's friend, you're sharing personal things. You're having intimate conversations, like emotionally intimate conversations. You're sharing things about your family. Things about your marriage might come up, and that's how a lot of affairs start, right? Emotional cheating is where it starts from. Like, I have problems with my husband, and then he's like, I have problems with my wife, and then, you know, they start talking, and that's how it happens. So just to be on the safe side, you shouldn't be friends with any man, especially the men. And don't, like, if your husband doesn't approve of a guy, just don't even talk to him. Like, there's no reason for you to talk to anybody, any man that your husband doesn't approve of. That's not, that you're not related to. Intimacy. Okay, so why is the husband's right of intimacy emphasized so much, right? Like, we have these ahadith that say, even if a woman is at the stove and she's cooking and her husband calls her, she should go. Even if she's like kneading the dough for the bread and her husband calls her, she should go, right? These kind of ahadith. Why do we have such explicit ahadith? Another one, the angels cursing one, right? Like if a husband calls the woman to bed and she refuses, and the angels curse her until morning. All of these are authentic ahadith, but why do they exist? I want us to put them in a modern context. What's the equivalent of like kneading the dough and baking the bread? Like, you're just doing something. You're engaged in a task at home. Now, we as women, we're multitaskers, right? We do a bunch of million things at once. And we're not like an on and off switch, right? For men, their desire is like an on and off switch. Whereas for us, it takes like a long time for women to get, you know, whatever. So the Prophet is actually saying, like, leave whatever you're doing and just go to him. Basically, like, mentally prepare yourself. He's telling the women, mentally prepare yourself for intimacy, even when it's inconvenient for you. So, like, sickness is a valid excuse. You can say no when you're sick, right? Physical sickness is a valid excuse. Even if you're not feeling up to it, like mentally, it is a valid excuse. But some women, they make a habit out of it, right? Like, I just don't feel like it. I just don't feel like it. I just don't feel like it. And some women, they never feel like it, right? Then the husband's going to suffer, because the purpose of marriage, one of the biggest purposes of marriage, is to preserve your chastity, right? If the husband is not getting his needs met, he's not going to be able to preserve his chastity. So it's becoming a fitna for him, because he's not actually getting his needs met. And two, it's for men, intimacy is very much physical. It's not just emotional. Like, for women, it's like, if we don't have intimacy for like a long time, whatever, like we said 4 months, right? For a man, it's unimaginable, right? To go 4 months while he's married without intimacy. So because of those natural differences, and because men often misunderstand women, and women often misunderstand men, the Prophet ﷺ just put it as a rule. Like, even if you don't feel like it, make yourself feel like it. Like, he's telling the women, be a little bit tougher on yourself to basically acquiesce, right? Not in the sense where you're like putting a burden on yourself that you can't handle, but you can basically get yourself to do something you don't want to do willingly, right? Like, you're willingly submitting to Allah's command. Okay, the other right that is explicitly mentioned is protecting his house in his absence. So you're protecting his wealth, you're protecting his possessions, you're not allowing people to come in that he doesn't approve of. So let's say, like, you know that he has, for example, a bad relationship with a certain relative. Don't let them in without his permission, right? He has many reasons for that. Because some people, they come and they cause fires in your home, right? And sometimes If you're coming into somebody's family, you don't know how the people are in his family, right? Just like he doesn't know the toxic people in your family. So when he lays a boundary, basically follow the boundaries, right? Like if he says he doesn't want a certain person coming home, don't bring them. Don't let them in your house when he's not there. Serving the husband. So again, this word is also used a lot. A lot of marriage books and things, they use that word. So the women, they always ask, well, why doesn't he have to serve us though? Why do we have to serve him? This goes to the, the polarity, masculine and feminine energies. So men like to be served. They do like to be served. And it actually increases their love for a woman when she's doing the serving. And when a woman is actually closer to her fitrah, she likes to serve as well. It's when you go away from your fitrah that you feel like, I don't want to serve. Like, why wouldn't you want to serve somebody you love, right? Why wouldn't you? Now, here's the thing. The Prophet ﷺ, one of the hadith that's always quoted by women in particular is that he used to mend his own shoes and mend his own clothes and milk his own goats and do everything around the house by himself. That is true, okay? But the context of that is to show that the Prophet ﷺ was a very independent person. That's the context. He was a self-sufficient person. He was not like I guess a lot of men are also man-children sometimes, where they just sit and demand things. The Prophet ﷺ was not a demander. He didn't sit and demand things of the women in his family, the children in the family. He wouldn't be like expecting people to wait on him, right? Like, I'm not going to eat until somebody serves me, or I'm not going to even pick up my plate, or I'm not going to do this. He was a very self-sufficient man, so he never asked people for favors, right? He never said, go get me this, or go do this, or go do that. Now, are we allowed to do that? Yeah, we can. Like, we do that with our family all the time, right? The younger siblings, we ask our kids to get stuff. We do that. It's okay. But the sunnah is to be more self-sufficient. When the Sahaba heard how the Prophet ﷺ was in terms of his self-sufficiency, when they were sitting on top of their camel and they dropped something, they wouldn't even ask somebody to pick it up for them. Like, hey, can you just grab that for me? They wouldn't even do that. Not because you're not allowed to, but because they wanted to be so close to the sunnah that they would actually get off of their camel, which is not easy, right? Like getting on and off, it's not easy. It takes an extra 2 minutes. So they would get down, pick it up, and then get back up, right? That's how much they would emulate the Prophet ﷺ. So the idea behind the hadith is that the men should not be waiting on the women to serve them alone, right? But when you as a woman choose to serve your husband, it increases love. And the Prophet ﷺ's wives did do that. Like there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ would be in the masjid, and there was like a window separating his house from the masjid, and he would like put his head back through the window, and Aisha radiallahu anha would comb his hair. Like, what need did she have to comb his hair? But she did it out of love, right? And it increases love between the husband and wife. So that's what's meant by serving the husband. And like traditionally, if the man is the breadwinner and he's coming home from work and you're preparing his food and you're putting it on the table and you're setting the table and making it look nice and you dress up and you welcome him, all of that goes under serving the husband, right? And it's basically just intended to increase the love, right? Okay, protecting his honor, children, and wealth. So we covered a hadith earlier where the Prophet said that every one of you is a shepherd, right? And every one of you is responsible for his family. So you're responsible for protecting his honor, his children, and his wealth. So if somebody comes to you and they start talking about your husband behind his back, it's not your job to add more fuel to the fire. Like, yeah, I know he's like this, and he's always late, and he never buys me anything, and you're adding more and more stuff. Even if it's true, you just stay silent, or you change the subject, or when we talk about backbiting in general, right? What are the guidelines on backbiting? You either shut down the conversation, or you change the subject, or you walk away, or you say something good about the person instead. Same thing applies here, right? And the husband and wife, they're equally responsible for each other's honor, right? When Allah says that you're garments for each other, right? What does a garment do? Like, it covers, it beautifies, right? And even if a garment doesn't fit perfectly, it still does its job, right? Like, we're not all wearing custom-made outfits over here, right? We're not like wearing some really super fancy thing, but it's still doing its job, right? Our clothes are still covering us. They're still beautifying us. Just like that, your spouse is supposed to cover you and beautify you. And the covering part, that's the very basic level. That's like the bare minimum. If your spouse does not cover your faults, they don't really have your back, right? They're not in your corner. And so that's one of the ways to protect a marriage. And if you don't do that, it causes resentment. If a husband and wife, if they fail to protect each other's honor, they will keep that inside, and it grows and it grows and it grows, and it comes out in fights, and you're just like, well, you didn't defend me when somebody said something about me, right? And they have every right to hold that against you. So we should try our best to protect our family's honor. Being thankful to him, gratitude. Prophet ﷺ said that the one who is not grateful to the people has not been grateful to Allah, right? And we know how big gratitude is. Our worship to Allah, our ibadah, is incomplete without gratitude. And so we have to make sure that we are expressing gratitude verbally, right? To our family members, to our husbands. And then there's another hadith actually that's quite controversial, where the Prophet ﷺ said that the majority of women, not the majority of women, sorry, the majority of the dwellers of the hellfire will be women, right? He said that, and he said why. They asked why, and he said it's because they are ungrateful to their husbands. The second thing I forgot. Anybody remember what the second thing was? There were two things that he mentioned. I think it was about backbiting, but I'm not sure. There were two things he mentioned. It would be backbiting. I think it would be backbiting, actually. But I don't quote me on it. But the second thing was definitely being ungrateful to your husband. Why did he say that? Because there's a different variation where he says that a woman's nature is that you'll do a lot of good for her, and then the day you do something bad, she'll be like, I never seen anything good from you. And like, there's different variations in how we do this. Like, but we do it. Like the Prophet he's just expressing female nature, and he's saying, don't be among those women. There's also other explanations to that hadith, right? Where the scholars say that the reason he said that the majority of the dwellers are going to be women is because there are more women in general, like in the population, right? So it doesn't mean that majority of us are going to hell, but it means that the percentage-wise, the number is higher in hell of women because there are more women in the world. And even now, like, that percentage is already there. And as we get closer to the Day of Judgment, it's going to be 50 women for every one man. So population-wise, it makes perfect sense why that hadith would be there. So there's different scholars have taken different, takes on it. But the gratitude piece is huge. And the thing is that a lot of women try to change men, right? Like how many women would change, like, the men in their lives? Like, I wish he would pick up his socks, or I wish he would be more this, I wish he would be more loving, I wish he would be more this. And the way we do it is by nagging, right? And nagging is not the way to do it, because nagging shuts a man down. Like, as soon as you start nagging emotionally, he's shut off. He doesn't want to please you, he doesn't want to help you, he doesn't want to support you at that point, doesn't want to listen to anything you have to say. But as soon as you start bigging him up, because their egos are so big, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but their egos are actually so big, when you start praising a man and being grateful to him, he'll do more. So anything you actually want him to do, the way to do it is to be grateful for what he has already done, and then, like, encourage him, right? That's the only way, because men don't change because women want them to. They only do it because they want to. So gratitude is like one of the biggest ways to get him to be more emotionally attached to you and to feel good about himself, because when he feels good about himself in your presence, then he wants to do more for you, because he associates that good feeling with you at that point, right? So when you get that emotional connection going, you keep capitalizing on it, right? It's a strategy.
I went to a lecture,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was all martial class.
Mm-hmm.
It was Yasmin Ahmed, and she said something so profound in regards to, like, serving the
Mm-hmm.
husband.
Yeah.
She was like, sometimes as women, we take that and we, like, start, like, cleaning the house, and we start changing the kids, and putting them to bed early, and doing, but we never have the conversation
Mm.
of, like, what they want from us. So we're doing all these things, and they're not necessarily perceiving it
Yeah.
as, like, serving.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like, why can't we have these conversations with our husbands? Like,
Yeah.
sit down and be like, this is where my gratitude
Yeah.
would be the highest level if you did X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
And he could say the same thing. You could say the same thing.
Yeah.
My gratitude would come if you did X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And now you're actually meeting the other person's, like,
Yeah.
definition of serving, as opposed to what in our head is serving,
Yeah.
because we wish somebody would do this for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus that. And so it was like pretty profound, because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it can change the whole, like, feeling in the house.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
especially change the word serving.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. Yeah, because we as women, we're always told, like, to be a good wife, you just have to do a lot of work around the house. Like, you have to serve, and, like, you have to cook and clean, and everything revolves around household duties for some reason. But we're taught so little about the connection itself, and, like, just being in your feminine energy, because that actually requires less. But when you're feminine energy, like, you just become magnetic to him, you know? Which, yeah. Yeah, exactly. But when we communicate, it's always about something negative. Like the we need to talk is always like something negative rather than something positive. Okay, chastisement, discipline, we kind of went over that. Like if she's crossing any Islamic boundaries, if she's engaged in activities that are un-Islamic or harmful to her, he has the right to stop her from doing those things. And he can use different methods to try to convince her to stop, you know. That's basically what's meant by discipline. Telling her how to dress, that would come under that as well. So for example, if a woman is overly flashy, right, or if she's not wearing proper hijab, or if she's actually like, there's a difference between just looking presentable and attracting attention, right? So if a woman is attracting attention, or if she's talking to men in a way where she thinks she's being polite, but it's coming across as if she's being flirtatious, he has the right to stop her from doing that. Okay, rights of the wife. Treating her in a kind and respectful manner. The Prophet emphasized this so many times. He said, be gentle with the fragile vessels. He's referring to the women as fragile vessels because it's like imagine like made of glass, and you have to be very careful how you handle us, and you know, like we can get hurt very easily. If we drop, we break, you know, that kind of stuff. So he told the men to treat women like fragile vessels, basically. In another hadith, he said, in the farewell sermon actually, he said, treat your women well because they have rights just as you have rights, and be kind to them. And over and over and over and over, he said kindness. Why? Because words can make or break our hearts, right? Why is it that like these toxic men can trap women so easily? It's because they just have to say a few words, right? All it takes is a few words for a woman to be like wrapped up in, you know? And then the moment you say a few harsh words, you break her heart completely. The Prophet understood that. Like he understood women on such a deep level. He respected them on such a deep level. He valued them so much. And every time his wives would talk to him, he would listen. He would listen attentively, right? One of the biggest things women say is, you don't listen when I talk, right? Just a simple thing like that. He showed us by example how closely he listened to his wives, how every word that they said had meaning to him, how when they would cry, he would care and ask about why they're crying and what they feel like, right? So that's why he mentioned kindness over and over and over. And that's why it looks like something so small, but it really colors every interaction, right? Imagine if every single husband spoke to his wife about every single thing as kindly as she wanted him to. What would that relationship look like, right? Teaching her matters of religion and worship. So this is more in terms of like, okay, if he has a lot more knowledge than her, and she's a revert or a convert, or she's just starting to practice Islam, or she's much younger than him, right? It's his duty to make sure that she knows the fara'id of her religion, right? Like how to pray, how to make wudu, ghusl, these very, very important acts of worship. It's his job to make sure that she has that education. So whether he teaches her himself or he sends her somewhere to learn it, that's his job. That's on him religiously. He'll be asked about it because she's under his leadership, right? Under his care. Maintaining her chastity. So again, generally, yes, there's a stereotype that men are the ones who are always crazed about intimacy and all of that. But there are some who get married who are actually gay. And they get married to cover their sexuality. Practicing Muslim men, right? They have a good intention. They want to preserve their chastity, but they hide it from the wife. These are real stories that have happened. Shuyukh have written about them. On Muslim Matters, there's articles about this where Muslim men were gay and they married a woman to overcome their sexuality. So they had a good intention, but they hid it from the woman, right? If you don't hide it from her and she's okay with it, bismillah, right? But if you can't hide it from her. There are some men who are asexual. They don't have any feelings. They don't have any desires. But again, they get married because family pressure or something. There's some men who just, you know, whatever reason, they can't give the woman her rights. He's violating her rights, right? Because it's his job to maintain her chastity. So if he can't give her what she needs naturally, then she can also go get help for that. She can go to an imam, get the marriage annulled if he's not able to give anything, provide anything for that, right? And then financially maintaining her. So he cannot expect her to provide because the natural expectation is that he's the provider and he cannot expect her to be the provider. He cannot even expect her to go 50-50 unless she's 100% okay with that, right? They can't be like at the nikah, he's like, yes, yes, yes. And after they get married, he's like, oh, sorry, I don't make enough. You have to work. He can't demand that from her. It only comes from her, like, you know, her prerogative. He cannot force her to provide. That's his responsibility. Okay, so we have different models of marriage. Actually, before we do that, any questions on this? Questions, comments, concerns? Yes.
Are there rights of the wife in terms of, like, what if your husband has friends with female friendships? Because I feel like that's for the rights of the husband. But what if the wife is not okay with
That's a good question. She doesn't have the same authority, but she definitely can tell him to stop. I mean, she can try. If he doesn't stop, I mean, if it's like a recurring problem, they might have to go to marital counseling eventually. But it depends on the nature of the friendship as well. How close is the friendship? How long has it been there? Why is it still there?
It wouldn't be a halal relationship, though, because same
Wouldn't be
doesn't
halal.
have a friendship.
The friend thing is really, it's really iffy. There's a lot of gray,
Even with men?
yeah, there's a really gray area there. Well, actually, I feel like there's less of a restriction on the man than the woman, because when the woman is married, she is like under his leadership, whereas he's not under anybody's leadership. So it just comes down to taqwa at that point. Yeah, it comes down to taqwa. Like if he fears Allah enough, he's got to do the right thing. But if he doesn't, yeah.
I think I could be the opposite, because for women,
Mhm.
it's like when she's married, okay, she should be like okay to have friends because she's already married,
Mhm.
and like she's like like giving her like the virtue to her husband.
Yeah.
And for men, it should be more like under guard,
Mhm.
lock and key because
Mhm.
of their desires and whatnot. It should be more like, hey,
Yeah.
now that you have me, you don't need them for any reason or whatever. Unless,
Yeah.
of course, like you said,
Yeah.
if it's a
Mhm.
job matter or like
Mhm.
other things, or
Yeah.
whatnot, that's fine. But I feel like, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
not saying anything, like blasphemous. I think just in
Yeah,
general,
yeah, yeah.
like, it should be more
Mhm.
guarded for them due to the the intimacy rage that they have. So
I just, yeah, somebody asked me this question before. Basically, what the question that you're asking, it's about friendship specifically, but if I zoom out a little bit, the question that I was asked is, what can a woman do to stop her husband from doing things that she doesn't want him to be doing, right? It's not an easy question to answer. Because there is no actual protocol given to a woman like is given to a man. Like the man has those 3 steps that he takes, right? Where he advises her, then he leaves the bed, then he strikes her with a miswak or whatever. There's no protocol like similar to that given to a woman. So it's like,
I assume she just talk to her parents. Or her
yeah,
husband,
she can talk to her parents. Yeah, she can talk to her parents. She can go to an authority figure. Yeah, any authority figure. That's her way, because she doesn't really have that power over the man. So it is tricky. Yeah, I wouldn't know how to answer that question. Yeah. All right, so in a traditional marriage, there's a clearly defined role. So the man is provider, protector, the woman is homemaker and caretaker. And this is based off of their fitrah, right? Everything, so the roles themselves, the reason why throughout history people naturally went towards these roles is because they were naturally made for those roles. They were fit for those roles, right? Like Allah made us able to be emotionally available even while being multitasking, right? Men can't do that. They're just so singular focused. They can't even have 2 conversations at the same time. Like they're so just, whereas women, they're cooking and taking care of the baby and having a conversation on the phone and doing a million things, and women who work and take care of the home and everything. We're just wired like that, right? It's easier for us. Can a man not raise the children? Yeah, he can, but it'll be exponentially harder on him because he cannot provide the same emotional support to a child. He just can't. It's not in his nature. So who suffers? The child, right? The children suffer when the roles are reversed. Now the women, I'm just going to talk in terms of results, right? We had 3 different waves of feminism, each of them for a different reason, right? We had the political one, we had the sexual whatever revolution for women, whatever, all that stuff. Now the women who are working, women have experimented with it all, right? Being housewives, being working mothers, doing both at the same time, everything. And what I hear, at least a lot, even in the non-Muslim circles online, like in forums, everywhere, is that they're sick of working. That's what they want most, is just sit at home. They're like, I just wish I had somebody to pay the bills for me. Right. The ideas of working are so attractive when you're in your 20s, right? Like, I'm gonna be a strong, independent woman. And then when you get into your 30s, you're just like, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with this life. If not by your 30s, at least by your 40s, you're like, I just want somebody to take care of me. Especially with children. Because we're not wired. Like even our hormones are not supposed to be working around the clock like that. Like having the 12-hour, like, 12-hour workday, whatever hour workday we have. Like the entire working world was designed around men. And so like women are living that cycle, and then their hormones are getting messed up because we require a lot more sleep. Like now they're starting to discover that the 8-hour sleep thing is also wrong. It's based off of men. We require a lot more sleep, like up to 10 hours, because our hormones are different. Like we need more rest because we're doing so much more with our bodies as well. So subhanAllah, like Allah created these roles because he created the fitrah, right? So he made us suitable for a certain role. Now, are you allowed to be more egalitarian in a marriage? Like, can you get rid of the roles and just choose to have like a 50-50 marriage where like, okay, both of you guys are working and both of you guys are taking care of the house and both of you guys are doing everything? Yes, you can. It's halal, right? I'm not going to say it's haram. Scholars have said it's halal. A lot of them have said it. But when you do it, you quickly realize after a few years that it's not working, right? Then a lot of people, they experiment, then they go back to the traditional ways anyway. Yeah, yeah, they're not happy. Exactly. Yeah, because it's just like they're not getting, even if you put the children aside, the man and the woman are not getting the best of each other, right? Because if a woman is tired from work, she's not able to be in her feminine energy as well. Like, yeah, because you're always like working. You're in that masculine mindset of getting things done. You can't relax. And a lot of women complain about that. I can't relax. Even when I have a day off, I can't relax. I'm thinking about work. On vacation, I have my laptop open. Like, that's not how you want to live your life, right? You want to be able to relax and like enjoy and just, be that person, like woman that you want to be. And it just doesn't allow for it. So Islamically, is it allowed? Yes. Is it recommended? No. It's actually recommended to be in a traditional marriage because it's more complementary to your fitrah. That's why.
There's something that they state
Mhm.
that I don't know where it was said, but like even if the wife works, like the responsibility of like the children, like on how they become their characteristics, and
Mhm.
like their deen,
Yeah.
their iman,
Yeah.
I guess, is still the number one priority for her. And if that's not like
Mhm.
that's still gonna fall on her.
Yeah,
Like
it
there
will.
are like 5 people
It
that
will.
are
Yes.
responsible,
Yeah.
that the woman is responsible for.
Yeah.
So you're still responsible for it, even if you're doing the 50-50. That's still
Yeah.
on the day of judgment going to fall
Yeah.
on the woman,
Yeah.
and that's like a big risk to take.
Yeah, exactly. Man and woman, but like if I put it in the context of that hadith, the shepherd hadith, then yes, because she's responsible for the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, in that sense, she would be asked about what she didn't teach them and etc. Like all that stuff. Yeah. Okay, but what both of these things have in common are mutual love and respect, mutual cooperation. So in a traditional marriage, it doesn't mean that the man is better, right? It doesn't mean that he is superior to the woman morally. They still have equal value in the eyes of Allah, right? In the Quran, like the value of men and women is already established, that you don't have less value because you're a woman. You have inherent worth that Allah gave you as a child of Adam. Like that's it. Just by virtue of being human, you have value. By virtue of being a woman, you have value. And it's not more or less than a value of a man. It's just different. That's all. But like if you really think about it, Adam wasn't made for Hawa. Hawa was made for Adam. So technically he needed her, right? So yes.
I have a question for like the raising of children
Mhm.
being asked in the day of judgment.
Mhm.
Is it being said that like a father has no responsibility in the day of judgment of like how their kids?
Oh no, he does.
Okay.
He does.
I was gonna.
No.
It was just the mom.
No, so there was a hadith that we discussed earlier. It was a longer one where the Prophet said that every one of you is a shepherd and every one of you is responsible for his flock. And then he said the husband is responsible for his wife and his kids, the whole family. So he's responsible for the protection, the provision, and the decision making, right? And then the woman, she's responsible for the husband's children and her children. So even if they weren't her children, but they live in the house, she's responsible for them. So in terms of like, was she there to give emotional support? Was she there to like teach them the things that moms usually teach, right? Because if the dad is out, then all of the raising children part falls on her. That's what they're talking about.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, but of course, if she tried her best and then the father didn't do anything, like let's say the public schools around were like really bad or something, and she had to send them there because the father decided not to do anything, that's on him, right? Yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna ask.
Yeah. Mhm.
With the idea of like traditional versus like
Mhm.
marriage, like I feel like this kind of excludes the idea of like the society we live in, which like we live in an economy where like
Mhm.
a mother and father have to go to work,
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so like as much as like people would love to be
yeah,
like a homemaker, like
yeah,
they just don't have that capacity if they want
yeah,
their child to like go to school and
yeah,
stuff. Like
yeah.
it has to come to the point where conversations have to be more about how do we navigate being both a wife and a mom, but also a worker, because
Exactly.
we don't have that comfort
Yeah.
of like just staying at home.
Of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of
And
course.
I think that also is also like when you're raising your children, you don't raise your daughters to be like you're gonna be staying at home. Like our parents
Oh, yeah.
are very much like you're getting a career,
Yes.
regardless of like if you have a husband or not. Like
Yes.
this is like you have to contribute to society, and
Yeah.
obviously like we've seen the
Yeah.
Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam,
Yeah.
she also like
Yeah.
was a work
Exactly.
part of
Yeah.
business, and so I don't know. I just feel like when I look at this, I think it kind of removes us from like where we're living in society where we just
Yeah.
can't live in.
That's true. So we're doing it out of necessity, which is fine because we have to like survive somehow. Let me say this though, even in that case, a very masculine man in his very masculine energy is gonna say would rather work 2 jobs than make his wife work. And I know these days, like, girls used to say, I'm just gonna marry a rich husband. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. These days, guys say, I'm just gonna marry a rich wife. My friend who's a substitute teacher, and I sub sometimes too, she told me that the middle schoolers are saying this, the Muslim guys. The middle and high school Muslim guys are saying, I'm just gonna get a rich wife. If she wants to do it all, let her do it all. Because they're coming from the red pill mentality, which is a response to extreme feminism, right? Radical feminism. So both of those are harmful for the family. They actually had a session on this at ICNA just this past weekend on the harms of both red pill and radical feminism. And Islam is in the middle. Islam doesn't subscribe to either of them, which sometimes it sounds like it might, but it doesn't actually, right? So what I'm saying is that men, like a real masculine man in his masculine energy, who's really operating from that energy, he gets pride and a sense of accomplishment from providing for his family, and he would not want his wife to work. I'm not saying that says anything bad about the husbands who do let their wives work, but it just goes to show like where a person is at mentally and emotionally, and I would say how much they have matured, right? It's like, imagine your dad. Your dad will probably say like, I'd rather go out and work 3 jobs than see my daughters working, right? But when it comes to a husband, unfortunately, they don't do that for their wives sometimes, right? It's like there's a disparity between the way they treat their daughters and their wives. And that's the aspect of masculinity I'm talking about, where some men don't have enough of a protective nature for their wives the way they do it for their daughters. So yes, a husband and wife can make things work however they like. That's okay. But I really think that when a man steps up like that, it also makes the woman want to respect him more, which just feeds back into the polarity loop in a good way, instead of a negative way. Okay, so how can a husband and wife build love in their marriage? So there's a book by Gary Chapman called The 5 Love Languages. These have become supremely popular over the last 10 years. Like, first nobody heard about it, and now it's all over social media. I highly recommend reading this book, or even just going on Google and learning a little bit about each love language. So there's 5 of them. Words of affirmation are like, okay, so the 5 love languages, the way they work is that either this is the way that you show love, or it's the way you like to receive love. So your giving love languages might be different than your receiving love languages. That's totally okay, right? So words of affirmation are like, you like to hear words of encouragement. You want to know when you're doing a good job. You want to be told, I love you, I care about you, I got your back. You need to hear these things. Even if you know, like, your spouse loves you, you just have to hear it. It's part of your nature. Quality time, you want them to be able to spend time with you without, without distractions, without the cell phone, without the kids, without anybody. You just need to spend that one-on-one time with that person to feel connected. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's just 15 minutes every day after dinner, whatever it is, but it has to be quality time. Gift giving, so you either love giving gifts to people or you love receiving gifts because it reminds you that, oh, they were thinking about you, right? Acts of service, you like to cook for them, you like to clean for them, you like to get their, fill up their car with gas, something like that. Or you love it when people do that for you, take care of you when you're sick, things like that. And then physical touch. Some people just, this refers to non-sexual physical touch as well, obviously. Like, you like hugs, you like to hold hands, you like to just cuddle, and it makes you feel loved and warm. So those are the love languages. And yeah, definitely sit down, if you're married, sit down with your husband, talk to him. And also these love languages, they're not just for couples, they're for families too. So you can ask your parents, you can ask your kids, you can ask your siblings, what's your preferred love language, and then use that, right, on Eid, on their birthday, whatever. Get into the habit of using people's love languages, because just because you're showing love doesn't mean love is being received, right? If we're like, well, I love my sister, well, does she know that you love her, right? Have you told her lately? Have you gotten her something, right? So we should definitely be more expressive in our love, and that's part of the sunnah. There's actually a couple who are like, the guy is an imam and the wife is like a teacher, and they go around the world teaching a class called the Sunnah love languages, and they pull out all the instances from the Sunnah where the Prophet practiced each of the love languages, and then they do like couples workshops and stuff like that. So it's actually really cool. All right, dealing with conflict, I think we'll end over here after this. So there's something called the love and respect cycle. I don't know what the book is called, but there's a book on which this is based, which says that the more respectful a woman is, the more loving the man is. And the more loving he is, the more respectful she is.
This was the Al-Mufrad class, the love and respect cycle.
Oh, really? Yeah, Ustad Yasmin, she's yeah.
Amazing.
I love her so much.
This one class.
Oh, really? Wow, subhanAllah.
It made us look at it completely different.
I didn't even know she had a class called that, though.
She came to UMD with one other person, and she did like
Oh, wow. SubhanAllah. Yeah,
whole weekend on just this one topic.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah, that's what she always says. And it's actually so true. Like, if you ever find yourself in a conflict with a man, like even any man, not just your husband, but any man, it goes down to this. If you're feeling like, oh, how can he be so cold? How can he be so cruel? How can he say this to me? And it's like breaking your heart. If you examine what happened before that, it's probably because you said something that was very disrespectful, that he perceived as disrespect. Because men become extremely cold and harsh when they're disrespected, or when they feel disrespected, and then the cycle continues. Or like, let's say he started it and he started saying this stuff to you, now you started saying stuff back, right? That is extremely disrespectful. So it just continues to cycle over and over and over again. And the only way to break it is that one person has to do the opposite, right? If you find yourself in that cycle, one person's got to break it, right? And of course that goes for both men and women. It's not just for women that, oh, women should always apologize first or whatever, but sometimes we have to, right? With men and their egos. Men don't apologize first, unfortunately. Okay, the four horsemen are based off of John and Julie Gottman. The Gottman Institute is one of the leading institutes about, like, in terms of marriage and conflict and stuff. And he's actually a scientist, and he did like a study on couples. So he I think monitored 99 couples or something like that on camera, and he examined their, like, with permission of course, he examined their patterns of communication. And what he found is that he can predict divorce with like a 90-something% accuracy. So he predicted divorce in couples who used the four horsemen. And the four horsemen are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Criticism is when you say, you are XYZ, like you are such a stingy person. That's criticism. Contempt is to take it a step further and to now make a moral judgment about their character and put yourself above them and be like, you're such a stingy person that whatever, you add something onto it to make it even like sting a little more, right? So you add some like instances where they were being stingy, and you really make it into this whole like character assassination, and you're saying it from like a moral high ground. Like you think you're above them and they're below you. That's contempt. Defensiveness is like anytime they bring something up to you, you're like, no, I didn't do that. No, I didn't say that. No, how can you, whatever. And the person just feels like, I can never bring up an issue to this person, right? That's excessive defensiveness. Like your walls go up as soon as they say something. You're like, no, I didn't do that. What do you mean? And you don't take into consideration their feelings at all. So there's like zero empathy over there. Stonewalling is like you just shut down. But it's kind of tricky because people who have been through trauma will also shut down, but they're not doing it intentionally. Like they don't mean to shut down, but they might. And so you got to know your spouse before you can make a conclusion that they're actually stonewalling. Because stonewalling is more like, let's say you're feeling flooded by emotion, and you can say like, okay, I need 15 minutes. Can I go take a walk? And then we'll come back and we'll talk about it again. That's not stonewalling. But if you're just like, I'm not listening to you anymore, and you just shut down, the person's talking, and you just walk out, right? That's stonewalling. Or you shut the door in their face. Because like, I don't want to hear you anymore, you shut the door. That makes them feel like, oh my God, what just happened, right? That's stonewalling. So you don't want to do any of those things. So the couples who did these things, they got divorced, like I think 90 something percent of the time. Soft startups. So choosing the right time to discuss issues, that's a way to prevent any conversation from going into a conflict. If you don't use a soft startup, it's going to escalate into a conflict. So instead of being like you, no, you're like I felt whatever because of something you said or did. So use the I statements and you choose the right time. So when he comes home from work, that's not the right time. When he's stressed out about something, that's not the right time, right? When there's some like a major issue going on in the background, like let's say there's like a family member who's ill, or there's like a work thing going on that's going to take like 2 weeks to complete, that's not the time to bring up some big issue, right? You've got to wait for it to pass, wait for things to cool down, and then you bring up the issue. And also asking him, hey, is this a good time to talk about XYZ? And then you start, right? Rather than just like, oh, this happened, and you had this to do, and whatever. Like, that's going to turn into a conflict. And then the 4 horsemen are going to come in, and it just becomes bad, like, from there. All right, I think that's the last part, actually. What time is it? Yeah, we're at 7:30. Yeah, we'll stop, and then we'll continue. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. All right, do we have any questions, any comments?